Hi everybody. Just wanted to give you a brief overview of a little data mining API called JSoup, which is used to parse HTML. The HTML is treated just like XML, only with a difference. And the difference is it has some fairly well understood tags, and it also has some tags that allow you to start expressions without ending them. So you need something that's a little bit tolerant of non-strict XML usage, and JSoup is an API that's designed just for that. First, let's give you an introduction. A web crawler is a program that goes out on the web, takes the URL that it's provided, uses that as a base, and then proceeds to get all the links in the page, and then recursively parses all of those URLs, puts them into a queue, and schedules their retrieval, eventually putting them into a database or some sort of file storage facility. Typically we start with something very simple, like downloading a single web page. So here we are with a Google URL. Let me see if I can get my pointer up in here. There we go. So here's the Google URL. And then we open a stream, which will read the URL, and can throw all sorts of interesting exceptions if it doesn't allow it. We get an input stream reader, and we can take this writer in here, output the data that we find. Then what we do is we read one line at a time until we retrieve null, and we print the line out to the console and write it out to the buffered writer, which goes out to data.html. We write a new line every time we read a line so that we can keep things well formatted. When we're done, we close the reader, we close the writer. Always close your files when you're finished. And that essentially will give you a locally generated HTML file, as well as something that appears on the in the console. So getting web data is just the beginning. Then the question becomes, well, what do you do with it? So first we start with this idea about a document object model, or DOM. What we want to do is we want to take XML, or well-formatted HTML, known as XHTML, or poorly formatted HTML, which is typically what people are typing nowadays, and try and create some sort of a document object model. At the root element, we'll have a begin HTML tag, and hopefully there'll be an end HTML tag somewhere. There'll be a head tag, which will contain titles and some title text. There'll be a body tag, perhaps heading one element. Maybe there'll be some anchor text and some hypertext references. And all of these will be placed into a data structure called the document object model, which is little more than a tree. So the basic notion is that HTML tags contain syntactic information about formatting, but we can sometimes use this formatting information and interpret it in a semantic way. That is to say, well, if we know that news stories always appear with a header of level 3, then we can get their titles off of header level 3, the text that follows, and use that to populate some sort of a data structure. Normally, we'd like to be able to get not just the header text, but also attributes and values. So here, align center is one of the attributes, align, and the value is center. So along comes JSoup as an API. And just like HtmlEditorKit, its goal is to be able to do some kind of parsing of HTML. But it's a little bit more modern, and it's designed to be a little bit more robust. So the JSoup API comes with a series of packages, a parser, a selector, helper, some examples, and it's built into the distro for the Java for Programmers code. So here's an example where we use an input stream reader from system_in so that people can type these things on the console. And then we create a buffered reader and then proceed to read one line at a time. Presumably a URL will be typed. And then what we're going to do is get the HTML file off of that URL with a JSoup connect. So that's going to snarf the entire thing and create a document object model, or doc, and that's a typed document. And then what we can do is select all of the anchor texts that have href attributes, and that'll give us all the links. And now we can go through and we can print out each one of those links and then proceed to list the links, which would be very good if we were going to build a web crawler, because we'd want to go to the document, get the links, and then explore each one of those links in turn, recursively listing all the links in the system. Here's another example. We were going to get the document, the links, and individual links, and what we're going to do is we're going to print these out one at a time. And so we're first going to go get the HTML file from a doc, then we'll get the title. And the title is making reference to a HTML tag called title, and it'll print out the title so we can interrogate the document, and that's all being done inside of memory, so the document has already been read in and parsed. Here we are getting all the links, and then we'll print those out along with attributes. So now you can build things like a news crawler, which will focus on getting all of the news data. We can go in off of the list of predefined news sources. We can crawl every so often. Here we're crawling every 30 minutes. We go and get the news URL, we download it, we put it into the news database, and then we can develop a series of different news articles. So this is the news crawler. Now comes a web page parser. Only in this case, the web page is going to be based in a local file, data.html. What we'll do is we'll define the data type as Unicode 8-bit, and we'll do our parsing from the input file, get our document, get our href links, and now we can print out the links again. So the input can come from file, it can come from a URL, could come from just text that you happen to come across. And there are several different APIs available for HTML parsing: Xerxes, Nico, JSoup, and JSoup is the one that I've been using lately, but there are still others, a HtmlEditorKit, for example. And so that's the quick background and presentation. Let's do a demo. We'll start with the link utils. And here what we're going to do, I've got a cover. This is a cover of my book, and we can see what that looks like right over in here. What we'd like to do is we'd like to identify the media for the book. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to bring up the web page. Here's the cover. It's got some media in it. What we'd like to do is extract that media from the page. If we look at the page source, we can see that there is an image source and there's some sort of GIF object. What I'd like to do is use this base URL in order to be able to get a fully qualified domain name and URL location for the image that this URL references. So we'll do the JSoup connect to the URL, and then what we'll do is we'll print the media. And to get at the media, what we'll do is we'll select any source information. We'll look for image attributes in the source tags, and then what we'll do is we'll print those things out. So now to run the program, what we get here is something called the book image, which is extracted. Now when we click on it, there it is. That's the image we were looking for. And now we've got a fully qualified domain name, and we've got an absolute location for the GIF image. So the resource for the source information is fairly well identified. And so that's an example of using. I think we can reformat that nicely for television. Let's see, reformat code. There we go. So now let's try another example. This one, let's see, we'll do a parse example. This one has a embedded HTML object. Let's do another code reformat. There we go. And so now you can see the HTML is actually embedded as a literal in the program. And what we're going to do is we're going to parse that as a string. And so we're going to first, we can parse it as a string, or we can go and we connect. Here we're going to connect to a table. Let's see how that works out for us. We're not using the links, so we could probably get rid of that. We're not using the PNG pictures. We don't care about them. We're not going to do the masthead or the result links. Instead, what we're going to do is just get the elements that have to do with table data. So we're just going to get the table data elements. And so what that means to us is we can get rid of all of this. And there we go. So just to get the table data elements, let's see what that looks like when we go and get it. First, I want to see what the table is. So we'll go into the table, and here's a table of information about various brokers. And now what we're going to do is we're going to parse that table data. And there it is. So now anything that has to do with table data is being printed out for us. And we can see all of that stuff is actually available. There's a few ways in which you can parse tables. This is the JSoup way. It's getting everything with the table data element in it. But there's other ways to do this as well. Table parsing, I have a nice example in here where we go and we take a table. Here's a table of companies with price to earnings ratios, actually mutual funds with price to earnings ratios that have been computed in aggregate, and that created a nice table. And we can proceed to take this table apart and identify it as comma separated values, and that's kind of useful for people who use Microsoft Excel. And we'll try and use that now. Let's see. And so now we've taken the table and we identified all the table rows and all the table data, and we created a comma separated value output. To see how that works, it's kind of cool actually. I get a URL, open up an input stream, and then I proceed to take the input stream and create a reader out of it and feed that reader into an HTML editor kit. And the HTML editor kit will create a document from the reader, and then proceed to create an element that we can read directly. This thing called the HTML parser single takes the string buffer and proceeds to do parsing, handling the end tag when an HTML tag comes in, and the beginning tag. And when there's a table row, we add the new line. When there's table data, we add the comma. So when the table data tag appears, and you can kind of see that in here. We'll view the source just so you can see. All right, so here's table rows, and a single table row can have many columns of table data. When there's an end table row, that's when we put in the new line. When there's an end table data, we put in the comma. So that gives us an opportunity to alter the output. And using this technique, we've got what's called inversion of control. Handle end tag is something that is called for us when there's an end tag appearing. And then what we do is a dispatch that tells the program what to do when it encounters the different end tags. So we've got our own little HTML table parser, and we're going to parse a single table. If you have multiple tables, I've got another version called HTML Table Parser Multi. And that'll parse multiple tables in a single HTML document, which is kind of cool and perhaps useful. Let's try another example. Here's a table row example. And this one is going to be using JSoup. And let's see if it works on this simple table data. So this table data looks like it's got Jill Smith 50 and Eve Jackson 94 as two people with 3 columns in 2 different rows. So table row has 3 columns here, and then the next table row has 3 columns. And then we have a start of a table, and we have the end of the table. And what we're going to do is we're going to parse the HTML using JSoup. We'll start with the embedded string. That's an embedded literal. We'll create a document from that. Then we'll select our table rows. And then for each table row, we'll get the table data. And then for each table data element, we'll get the text and then print the text out. So let's see how that works. And there you go. Jill Smith, Eve, whatever. So let's see now. When you print out the table data, you could probably have put in a comma, and instead of using a print line, you could just use a print. And then at the end of each row, then you could use the print line. And now when you run, I think there'll be an extra comma at the end of the row, but that's okay. We don't care about that right now. So there you have it, a mechanism for doing simple HTML parsing using JSoup. And you can use arbitrary HTML sources. Here we have the HTML source located as a literal inside of the program, but clearly you could have taken the HTML source and gotten it from somewhere else. And that's my demo. Hope you liked it. Thanks for your attention. Bye.